The late summer wind carried more than dust through Sagebrush Bend that August afternoon in 1885. It brought Cole McKenna, slouched low in his saddle, his weathered hat pulled down against the Wyoming sun. The town stretched before him like a dozen others he'd passed through wooden storefronts bleached gray by weather, horses tied to hitching posts, and the inevitable church steeple rising above it all like a finger pointing at sins yet uncommitted. Cole hadn't planned to stop. His pattern was simple ride-through, maybe water his horse, move on before anyone asked questions or offered work that might tether him to one spot too long. But the screaming changed that. A boy, no more than 8, stood frozen in the middle of Main Street as a team of cattle thundered toward him, spooked by something unseen. The drover had lost control, his shouts lost in the chaos of hooves and bellowing. Cole moved without thinking. The war had trained his body to act when his mind might hesitate. He spurred his mare forward, leaned low, and swept the boy up with one arm just as the lead steer barreled past. They rolled clear in a cloud of dust. The child clutched against Cole's chest. "Tommy!" A woman's cry cut through the noise as the cattle stampeded past, finally herded toward the stockyards by other riders who joined the chase. Cole set the boy on his feet, checking him over with quick, practiced movements. No injuries beyond scraped knees and wide, shocked eyes. "You're all right, son." "Mister saved me." "Ma?" The boy pointed at Cole as his mother swept him into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Thank the Lord," she breathed, then looked up at Cole with grateful eyes. "Thank you, sir, thank you." Cole touched his hat brim, already backing toward his horse. This was exactly the kind of scene he avoided grateful citizens wanting to know their hero's name. Maybe offer him supper or work. But a firm hand on his shoulder stopped him. "That was some riding, friend." Cole turned to find a younger man wearing a deputy's badge. His skin sun-darkened in a way that spoke of Mexican or Spanish blood. Unlike most lawmen Cole had encountered, this one's eyes held curiosity rather than suspicion. Just happened to be passing through. Cole said, "Lucky for young Tommy." The deputy extended his hand. "Jonah Reyes. You planning to stay in town long?" "Not particularly." Jonah's knowing smile suggested he'd heard that before. "Well, if you need work to fund your journey onward, Murphy's Ranch is hiring, or there's the railroad camp about 10 miles east." He paused, studying Cole with an intensity that made him want to reach for the colt at his hip. "You have the look of a man who's good with more than horses." "I get by." Before Jonah could probe further, a commotion near the train depot drew both men's attention. A small crowd had gathered, their voices carrying a mix of curiosity and something else: disapproval, maybe, or disappointment. "That's her, the new Schoolmarm," someone said. "Lord have mercy, look at her face." Poor thing, no wonder she came all the way out here. Cole had no interest in town gossip, but the crowd blocked the street. As he and Jonah approached, the people parted enough to reveal the subject of their attention. The woman stood beside a modest pile of luggage, her spine straight despite the whispers surrounding her. She wore a simple traveling dress of brown wool, practical rather than fashionable, and a wide-brimmed hat that couldn't quite hide what had sparked the crowd's reaction: a large port wine birthmark that covered much of her left temple and cheek, dark against her pale skin. "Afternoon, ma'am," Jonah said, touching his hat. "Deputy Reyes, welcome to Sagebrush Bend." She turned toward his voice, and Cole found himself looking into perhaps the steadiest pair of gray eyes he'd ever encountered. Whatever she'd expected from her reception, she wasn't going to show hurt or shame. "Thank you, Deputy. I'm Miss Beatrice Hart. I believe Mayor Dawson is expecting me." Her voice was educated, Eastern but not soft. This was a woman who'd learned to speak up to be heard. "Yes, ma'am. His office is just down Main Street, the building with the green door." Jonah gestured to some of the gawking children. "You boys there help Miss Hart with her bags." The children scattered like spooked chickens, leaving an uncomfortable silence. Cole watched anger flash across the deputy's face before he controlled it. "I'll help," Cole said, surprising himself. He grabbed two of the heavier bags before anyone could comment. Miss Hart studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Mr. McKenna." Mr. McKenna. She picked up a smaller bag in her teaching satchel. "I appreciate the assistance." As they walked, Cole noticed how she kept her chin up, meeting the stares of townspeople directly. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others, particularly a group of women clustered near the mercantile, made no effort to hide their whispers. The old schoolhouse burned down last spring. Jonah explained as they walked. "Been using the church for lessons when Reverend Pike allows it. The new teacher was supposed to arrive in June, but he caught himself. But he took one look at the accommodations and left." Miss Hart finished calmly. "Yes, Mayor Dawson was quite honest in his correspondence. I'm aware the position has been difficult to fill." They reached the mayor's office, where a portly man emerged, mopping his forehead with a handkerchief despite the relatively mild temperature. "Miss Hart, welcome, welcome. I trust your journey was... that is, you've arrived safely. I see." Cole set down the bags as Mayor Dawson's eyes flickered to Miss Hart's birthmark, and away again, like a moth testing a flame. "Indeed, I'd like to see the temporary classroom space as soon as possible." Miss Hart said, "I intend to begin lessons within the week." "Ah, well, about that." The mayor twisted his handkerchief. "Reverend Pike has some concerns about, that is, the church board feels that a woman of my appearance might disturb the children." Miss Hart's tone remained pleasant, but Cole heard steel beneath it. "I assure you, Mayor Dawson, children are far more disturbed by ignorance than by birthmarks. Now, shall we discuss the abandoned warehouse you mentioned as an alternative?" Cole found himself almost smiling. The mayor had expected a meek, grateful spinster who'd take whatever was offered. Instead, he'd gotten Beatrice Hart. "You handled that well," Cole said quietly as they left the mayor's office, heading toward the warehouse at the edge of town. She glanced at him, perhaps surprised he was still there. "I've had practice, Mr. McKenna, though I admit Western disapproval is more direct than its Eastern counterpart." The warehouse squatted like a tired animal at the town's margin, its wooden sides gray and splitting, but it was spacious, with high windows that let in decent light. "It'll need work," Miss Hart said, surveying the space with a practical eye. "The roof looks sound. At least, some of those boards need replacing, and we'll need to clear out these old crates." Cole asked. She turned to him with that direct gaze. "A figure of speech, I don't expect." A shadow fell across the doorway. A large man entered, well-dressed in a way that spoke of money and influence. His smile was the kind Cole had learned to distrust during the war, too wide, too friendly, with cold calculation behind it. "You must be our new school teacher," the man said, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Silas Throne, at your service. I own the Double Bar Ranch, largest spread in the county." Miss Hart inclined her head slightly. "Mr. Throne, I heard we'd finally found someone, dedicated enough to take the position." His pause before dedicated was deliberate. "Though I confess, I share some of Reverend Pike's concerns about the suitability of this arrangement." "Which concerns would those be?" Miss Hart asked. "Well, a young woman, unmarried, living alone so far from the respectable part of town, and with the railroad camp so close." He shook his head. "It invites unfortunate speculation." Cole watched Miss Hart's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "I appreciate your concern for my reputation, Mr. Throne. However, I've found that speculation says more about the speculator than the subject." Throne's smile thinned. "Indeed. Still, we must think of the town's moral standards." This building sits on quite valuable land. You know, the railroad's been inquiring about it for a new depot. It would be a shame if concerns about propriety forced us to reconsider its use as a schoolhouse. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Cole shifted slightly, a movement that drew Throne's attention. I don't believe we've met, friend. Just passing through. Cole said, Ah, well, we appreciate men who know when to move along in Sagebrush Bend. Throne's eyes lingered on the faded blue of Cole's shirt, the particular way he wore his gun. Unless they have legitimate business here, of course. After Throne left, Miss Hart stood quietly for a moment, then began pulling dusty canvas off a stack of abandoned furniture. You don't have to stay, she said without looking at Cole. I'm quite capable of managing alone. Cole knew he should go. Mount up, ride out. Leave this woman to fight her battles without him. That was the smart play, the safe one. But something about the way she attacked those dusty covers, as if she could defeat prejudice with sheer determination, made him grab the other end of the canvas. Roof needs checking before the rains come. He said, Some of these floorboards are rotted through. That's a two-person job at least. She studied him over the dirty canvas. I can't pay much. Didn't ask for pay. Then why? Cole didn't have a good answer, so he told a partial truth. That man, Throne, I've known his type. They don't like being told no. And you think I need protection? There was a hint of challenge in her voice. I think you need that roof fixed. A small smile played at the corner of her mouth, the first he'd seen from her. Well then, Mr. McKenna, I suppose we'd better get to work. They worked until dusk, clearing space and assessing repairs needed. Cole found himself telling her about wood grains and support beams, knowledge gained from helping rebuild after Sherman's march. She listened with the same attention she gave everything, asking intelligent questions. As darkness approached, a thin woman appeared in the doorway carrying a basket. Her face was weathered by sun and wind, her hair more gray than brown, but her eyes were sharp as a hawk's. Brought supper, she announced. Figured anybody fool enough to work in this dust trap would be hungry. She looked Cole up and down. You're the one who saved the Morrison boy. Yes, ma'am. I'm Nettie. I run the boarding house, clean beds, hot meals, and I don't tolerate foolishness. She turned to Miss Hart. You planning to stay at my place? Room's ready, though it's nothing fancy. Thank you, Mrs. Just Nettie. And don't mind the talk, girl. This town's full of bored folks with nothing better to do than flap their gums. She set the basket on a crate. Chicken and biscuits. Coffee's still warm if you hurry. After Nettie left, they ate in companionable silence, sitting on upturned crates as the last light faded from the high windows. Cole noticed how Miss Hart touched her birthmark unconsciously when she thought no one was looking. Does it hurt? He asked quietly. She startled slightly. What? Oh, no, it's just part of me, like your scar. Cole's hand went instinctively to his collar, where the rope burn was mostly hidden. How did you adjust it when you think about the past? She took a sip of coffee. We all have our marks. Mr. McKenna, some are just more visible than others. A coyote howled in the distance, and Cole felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Time to go, before he got comfortable, before someone started depending on him. I should head out, he said, standing. See about that room at Nettie's. Miss Hart rose as well, brushing dust from her skirts. Thank you for your help today. I appreciate it. As Cole walked back toward Main Street, he saw two figures near the corner of the warehouse boys, maybe 15 or 16, whispering and pointing. One made a gesture toward the building, and they both laughed in that cruel way young men do when they think they're clever. Cole changed direction, approaching them with the kind of quiet stride that had served him well in the war. The boys didn't notice until he was nearly upon them. Evening, gentlemen. They spun around, startled, One had the grace to look embarrassed. The other tried for defiance. "Just walking, Mr. Good night for it." Cole agreed. "Course, some walks are smarter than others. Be a shame if someone got the wrong idea about you boys hanging around the schoolhouse after dark. Might think you were up to mischief." The defiant one opened his mouth, probably to deny it, but his friend grabbed his arm. "We were just leaving." Smart choice. As they hurried away, Cole heard one mutter something about the ugly schoolmarm and her hired man. He let them go. Boys that age rarely learned from words anyway. The cracked school bell caught his eye as he passed, hanging from a broken frame near what used to be the old schoolhouse. Someone had left it there after the fire, too damaged to ring properly, but somehow too important to throw away. In the moonlight, the crack running through it looked like a river on a map, dividing the bell into two territories that would never quite meet again. But it was still a bell, still had the shape of something that once called people together. Cole shook off the fancy and headed for the boarding house. Tomorrow he'd fix what needed fixing, then move on. A few days at most, just until Miss Hart could manage alone. In the warehouse, Beatrice Hart lit a lantern and continued organizing, her shadow moving steadily across the walls. She'd faced worse than Silas Throne and his kind, at least here. The disapproval was honest, written on faces instead of hidden behind parlor room smiles. She touched her birthmark once more, then picked up a broom. Tomorrow she'd place an advertisement for students. Let them whisper. Children needed education more than adults needed their prejudices confirmed. Outside, the Wyoming wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and the distant whistle of a train that wouldn't stop in Sagebrush Bend. Not yet, but change was coming to this town, whether it was ready or not. And sometimes change arrived on horseback, saving children from stampedes and helping strange women clear out warehouses, even when it had every intention of leaving come morning. The cracked bell moved slightly in the wind, producing not a ring but a soft, almost musical hum, the ghost of its former voice, still trying to call people together across the divide. Chapter 2. The Wedding in the Stable. The summons came at dawn, delivered by a nervous boy who couldn't meet Cole's eyes. Mayor Dawson required his immediate presence at the town hall. The coffee in Cole's cup turned bitter as he read the formal language. In his experience, urgent meetings before breakfast rarely brought good news. The town hall was crowded for such an early hour. Silas Throne sat at the council table like a king holding court, flanked by Reverend Abel Pike, a man whose severe face seemed carved from judgment itself. Other prominent citizens filled the remaining chairs, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to smugly righteous. Mr. McKenna, Mayor Dawson began, wringing his hands. "Thank you for coming. We have a delicate situation that requires immediate address." Cole remained standing, his back to the wall where he could see everyone. Old habits. What situation? Reverend Pike leaned forward, his voice sharp as winter wind. "You were seen entering the warehouse with Miss Hart after dark, alone. You remained there for over an hour." "We were working, clearing space for the schoolroom." "So you admit it," Throne said smoothly. "An unmarried woman and a drifter, alone after dark. You must understand how this appears." Cole felt the familiar tightness in his chest, not fear, but the recognition of a trap closing. "It appears like two people preparing a schoolhouse. Deputy Reyes knew where I was." "Deputy Reyes is not a member of this council," Pike interjected, "nor does his background qualify him to judge matters of Christian morality." Jonah, standing near the door, straightened but said nothing. Cole caught his eye. The deputy's expression promised they'd talk later, if Cole survived this ambush. "Gentlemen," Mayor Dawson attempted. "Surely we're making too much of—" "Too much," Pike's voice rose. "The moral fabric of our community is at stake. We finally have a teacher. However unconventional her appearance, We cannot allow her reputation to be destroyed before she even begins. Seems to me you're the ones destroying it, Cole said quietly. The room fell silent. Throne's smile widened. Which is why we're offering a solution. Throne said, a way to preserve Miss Hart's honor and allow her to continue her work here. He paused for effect. You'll marry her. Cole had faced Confederate cavalry charges, survived prisoner camps, tracked outlaws through desert and snow. But this was a different kind of warfare. You're out of your mind. Are we? Pike stood, his black coat falling around him like wings. You compromised her reputation. As a man of honor, assuming you are one, you have an obligation. I carried some furniture, fixed a door frame. You were alone with her. At night, that's enough to ruin any woman, let alone one already burdened by disadvantage. Throne's reference to Beatrice's birthmark was subtle but clear. Of course, if you refuse, we'll have no choice but to withdraw support for the school. After all, we can't have a woman of questionable virtue teaching our children. The trap's teeth were showing now. Marry a stranger or destroy her dreams before they began. Cole had walked into this town meaning to help. And now, does Miss Hart know about this meeting? He asked. She's been summoned, the mayor said miserably. Should arrive shortly, as if on cue. The door opened. Beatrice Hart entered, wearing the same brown dress but with her hair pinned more severely, as if preparing for battle. Her gray eyes swept the room, taking in the assembled judges and landing on Cole with a question. Miss Hart, Pike began, but she raised a hand. I've been informed of the accusation, she said calmly. Mr. McKenna assisted me with heavy labor yesterday evening. To suggest impropriety from such kindness is not only insulting, but reveals more about the accusers than the accused. Nevertheless, Throne said, perception matters. Parents won't send their children to a woman whose virtue is in question. My virtue is not. You were alone with a man after dark, Pike interrupted. That fact cannot be disputed. Beatrice's jaw tightened. So your solution is forced marriage? How perfectly medieval. The alternative is your immediate dismissal. Throne said, the building you're using belongs to the town. We can withdraw permission at any time. Cole watched her shoulders set, the same way they had when facing Throne yesterday. She was going to refuse, throw their hypocrisy in their faces, and lose everything she'd traveled here to build. I'll do it, Cole said. Every head turned to him. Beatrice's eyes widened. Mr. McKenna. On conditions, he continued, not looking at her. The marriage stands until Miss Hart establishes her school and earns the town's trust. Then we'll handle divorce or annulment quietly. Until then, we maintain separate residences and lives, a legal arrangement only. Throne frowned. This wasn't the entertainment he'd expected. Separate residences defeats the purpose of. You wanted respectability. Cole cut him off. A married schoolteacher is respectable. Where we sleep isn't your business. I haven't agreed to this, Beatrice said sharply. Then perhaps you'd prefer to return east, Pike suggested. I'm sure they're more accommodating of modern ideas there. Cole saw the moment she realized what he already knew they'd lose either way. But this way saved something. Her dreams for the school, the children who needed education. The price was just freedom. And what was that compared to a future for others? I need to speak with Mr. McKenna, she said, privately. More private meetings. Throne tisked. We're engaged now, aren't we? Beatrice's voice could have cut glass. Surely engaged couples are permitted conversation. Mayor Dawson gestured weakly toward a side room. Cole followed Beatrice inside, closing the door on the watching faces. She whirled on him immediately. Why? You want that school? Not at the cost of. She stopped, searching his face. What's your angle? What do you gain? Cole almost smiled at her suspicion. Smart woman. A few weeks' work while my horse rests, then I move on. You file papers saying I abandoned you. Sympathy for the wronged wife. And you keep teaching. That's simple. Nothing's simple, but it's workable. She paced the small room, her skirts brushing the dusty floor. Rules, she said finally. If we do this insane thing, we need rules. Such as separate residences, as you said. No, expectations of wifely duties. Color touched her cheeks, but her gaze remained steady. We maintain the appearance of civility in public but live our own lives privately. Agreed. I manage my own finances and affairs. Wouldn't want it otherwise. She stopped pacing, studying him. Why are you really doing this? Cole thought of Confederate prisons, of men who died because someone wouldn't bend stupid rules, of his sister Miriam's letters, asking when he'd stop running and start living again, of a woman standing straight while a town whispered about her face. Maybe I don't like bullies, he said. Something shifted in her expression. Neither do I. They returned to the main room. Beatrice announced their agreement with the same tone she might use for reading a supply list. The council had what they wanted, even if it wasn't the drama Throne had hoped for. When? Pike demanded. Delays will only fuel more gossip. Today, Throne said, smiling again. Unless our happy couple objects. Cole felt Beatrice tense beside him, but she merely said, Today is acceptable. The wedding, if it could be called that, took place at 3 o'clock beside the livery stable. Pike had refused to open the church for what he called a union of convenience. So Mayor Dawson performed the civil ceremony in the only space available on short notice. The smell of horses and hay mixed with afternoon heat as a small crowd gathered, some genuinely wishing them well. Most come for the spectacle. Nettie stood in the front, her expression unreadable. Jonah served as witness, his presence a quiet support. Beatrice wore the same brown dress, having had no time to change. Cole had brushed the trail dust from his clothes, but still looked like what he was, a drifter playing a role. Do you, Cole McKenna, take this woman? The words washed over him like distant thunder. He'd made worse bargains, he told himself. This one at least served a purpose beyond survival. I do. Beatrice's voice was equally steady on her vows. When Dawson called for rings, an awkward silence fell until Nettie stepped forward. Use mine, she said gruffly, pulling a worn band from her finger. My Henry's been gone 10 years. About time it served the living. Beatrice's eyes misted the first emotion Cole had seen her allow in public. The ring was too large for her finger, but she closed her fist to keep it in place. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, Dawson concluded quickly. I pronounce you man and wife. No one suggested a kiss. The crowd dispersed with remarkable speed, leaving the newlyweds standing in barn dust and afternoon shadows. Well, Beatrice said, that was efficient. A laugh escaped her short, surprised. I was going to say awful, but efficient works too. Throne approached before they could escape, his satisfaction evident. I've arranged housing for our newlyweds, the old Fletcher place on the north edge of town. It's been empty a while, but I'm sure Mrs. McKenna will make it homey. Cole recognized the trap-isolated location, probably barely livable. Another way to make Beatrice quit, but she merely nodded. How generous. Mr. Throne, we accept. As Throne walked away, Jonah approached. That house needs work, he said quietly. Roof leaks, chimneys half blocked. Fletcher died 2 winters back, pneumonia. We'll manage, Beatrice said. I'll help when I can, Jonah offered. He looked at Cole. Both of you got played, you know that. We know, Cole said. The Fletcher place squatted on a rise overlooking the town, its unpainted boards weathered silver gray, The porch listed to one side, and several windows were cracked, but the walls were solid, and the view stretched clear to the mountains. Beatrice stood in what passed for a parlor, surveying water stains and dust. "I've lived in worse," she said finally. "At least here the contempt is honest." Cole began checking the fireplace, clearing debris. Where was worse? Boston, teaching at a school for young ladies. They kept me because I was brilliant with mathematics and languages. They also kept me in the attic rooms and had me eat separately from the other instructors. She touched her birthmark absently. Bad for the school's image. You understand. So you came west. I came where children need education more than society needs its prejudices upheld. She unpinned her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders, the first informal gesture he'd seen from her. "What about you? What are you running from?" Cole's hands stilled on the kindling. "Who says I'm running?" "The same instinct that says you've been kind to me without agenda." She began unpacking her few belongings from a carpet bag. "You don't have to tell me. We're business partners, not actual spouses." He built the fire in silence, coaxing flames from dry wood. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling loose boards. "Finally," he said. "Tennessee originally. Rode with the 4th Cavalry during the war. After..." He touched his collar. "After... there didn't seem much point in staying anywhere particular. Family. Sister in Nebraska, Miriam. She's got her own troubles. Husband died last year. Left her with a farm she can barely manage. You could help her. With what I've got, $20 and a tired horse." The bitterness in his voice surprised him. "Besides, she doesn't need another broken thing to fix." Beatrice set a chipped teapot on the crooked table. "We're all broken, Mr. McKenna. The question is whether we're broken in useful ways." That night, they established their arrangement's practical elements. Cole spread his bedroll on the porch despite Beatrice's protest about propriety. "We're maintaining separate lives. Remember," he said, "this is separate. You'll freeze when winter comes. Won't be here when winter comes." She didn't argue further, but he heard her moving inside, hanging a blanket over the broken window, sweeping years of dust from the floors, working the way some people prayed steadily, purposefully, making order from chaos. The next morning brought the first test of their arrangement. Mrs. Wellington, the banker's wife and self-appointed moral guardian of Sagebrush Bend, arrived with 2 other ladies from the church auxiliary. They came bearing bread and salt traditional housewarming gifts and enough sharp-eyed curiosity to skin a buffalo. "Mrs. McKenna." "Mrs." Wellington cooed, emphasizing the title. "How wonderful to see you properly settled. We were so concerned about your situation." Beatrice accepted the gifts graciously. "How kind. Would you care for tea? I'm afraid we're still organizing." The ladies swept inside, noting every water stain, every broken board, every sign that this marriage was exactly what they suspected, a sham to save face. "Your husband, Mrs." Wellington probed. "Where is he this morning?" "Working," Beatrice said smoothly. "The roof needs significant repair before the rains." As if on cue, hammering sounded from above. Cole had risen before dawn, unable to sleep with old dreams prowling his mind. Physical labor helped. Sometimes. "How industrious," one of the other ladies murmured. "Though I suppose a man of his background is accustomed to rough living." His background, Beatrice's tone could have frozen July. "Well, drifters and such. One never knows what they've done or where they've been. My husband served honorably in the war," Beatrice said. "Since then, he's worked honest jobs across the territories. I find his experience valuable, especially in establishing a proper school despite local challenges." The verbal fencing continued for another half-hour before the ladies left, no doubt to spread word that the new Mrs. McKenna was proud as ever despite her circumstances. Cole climbed down from the roof after they'd gone. "Heard voices." the welcome wagon. They wanted to assure themselves were as miserable as they hoped. Beatrice handed him water. You didn't have to fix the roof. Rain's coming. Maybe tonight, tomorrow latest. He drank deeply. Your students will start arriving soon. Can't have their teacher dying of pneumonia. Is that concern I hear? Practical thinking. I fix the roof now. I don't have to fix it in the rain. But he saw her smile small, knowing. They worked in companionable silence the rest of the day. Him on the roof, her scrubbing years of grime from the floors. By evening, the place looked less like abandonment and more like possibility. They ate a simple meal of beans and cornbread. Sitting on the crooked porch as the sun set behind the mountains, the promised rain still held off, but clouds gathered like an army on the horizon. I posted notices today, Beatrice said, about starting classes. We'll see if anyone comes. They'll come. Maybe not many at first, but some. You sound certain. Cole stretched his legs, feeling every hour of roof work. Parents want better for their children, even parents who whisper about birthmarks and forced marriages. Education's hope, and hope's hard to kill entirely. She turned to study him. You're not what I expected from a drifter. You're not what they expected from an ugly schoolmarm. The word hung between them until Beatrice laughed full and genuine this time. No, I suppose I'm not, though they got the ugly part right. Did they? In the fading light, with her hair loose and her face animated by laughter, Cole thought the town had gotten it exactly wrong, but that was a dangerous thought for a man who'd promised to leave. Mr. McKenna, she said softly. This arrangement, I know it's costing you. Freedom, reputation. Made my choice. Still, I want you to know, I'm grateful. When I leave, you'll be established, protected by marriage laws even in absence. That was the deal. She nodded, turning back to watch the sunset. Neither mentioned that deals sometimes changed, that temporary could become permanent without anyone deciding it should. That was another dangerous thought, so Cole pushed it away like all the others. That night, the rain finally came. It drummed on the new patches of roof, finding no entry inside. Beatrice graded the few sample problems she'd created for her phantom students. Outside. Cole lay on his bedroll under the covered porch, listening to the rain and not thinking about how a stranger's laugh could sound like home. Above them, barely audible over the storm, the cracked school bell hummed its broken song, calling students who hadn't arrived yet to learn from a teacher the town didn't want. But tomorrow would come anyway. It always did. Chapter 3. Bell ringing through dust. The first student arrived on a Tuesday morning, clutching a slate that had seen better days. Hattie Bloom stood at the warehouse door like she was preparing to enter a battlefield, chin up, eyes wary, 16 years of hard living written in her calloused hands. You still taking students? She asked Beatrice, who was arranging mismatched benches into something resembling rows. Of course. Come in, Miss... Hattie. Just Hattie. The girl entered cautiously, taking in the swept floors, the salvaged blackboard, the morning light streaming through cleaned windows. My PA said you're teaching more than just Bible verses. I teach arithmetic, reading, writing, history, and practical skills, Beatrice confirmed. Though I respect all faiths and incorporate moral lessons into our studies. Can you teach doctoring? Beatrice paused, surprised. Basic anatomy and health principles. Yes, are you interested in medicine? Want to be a nurse someday? Maybe even a doctor? Though Pa says that's fool thinking for a girl. Hattie's jaw set stubbornly. But I figured any teacher brave enough to marry a drifter and face down Reverend Pike might teach a girl real skills. Your father knows you're here. He's at the mine. Won't be back for 2 weeks. Hattie met Beatrice's eyes directly. I can pay. Save pennies from taking in washing. Keep your pennies. Can you help me with something instead? Beatrice led her to a pile of donated books, most water-damaged or missing covers. "These need sorting and repairing. Help me with this, and we'll call it even for tuition." Hattie's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Yes, ma'am." By noon, 6 more students had trickled in. The Martinez twins, Rosa and Roberto, whose parents worked the railroad camp, young Tommy Morrison, the boy Cole had saved from the stampede, dragging his reluctant older brother Daniel, 2 Negro children, siblings named Grace and Samuel Freeman, whose mother cleaned houses for barely enough to survive. Beatrice welcomed them all, ignoring the vast gaps in age and ability. She set the older ones to helping the younger, creating a makeshift community of learning in the dusty warehouse. Cole appeared at lunch, carrying a bucket of fresh water from the well. The children fell silent, watching the tall man with the scarred neck and quiet movements. Hattie was the first to speak. "You're the one who fixed Mrs. McKenna's roof." "Among other things," Cole replied, setting the bucket on the table Beatrice used as a desk. "My PA says you were in the war. Says you got the look of a killer." "Hattie," Beatrice admonished, but Cole held up a hand. "Your pa's not wrong," he told the girl evenly. "War makes killers of men who'd rather be farmers. Question is what they do after." "What do you do after?" Tommy piped up, curiosity overcoming shyness. Cole considered. "Fix roofs, haul water, try to be useful instead of harmful." The children digested this philosophy while Beatrice distributed the lunch she'd prepared: simple sandwiches and apples. But filling. Cole noticed she gave larger portions to the Freeman children, whose clothing showed the careful patches of poverty. "Can you teach us to shoot?" Daniel Morrison asked suddenly. "Why would you need to know that?" Beatrice interjected before Cole could respond. "Indians," the boy said matter-of-factly. "Pa says they're always waiting to attack." Cole and Beatrice exchanged glances. The nearest reservation was 50 miles away, its inhabitants more concerned with survival than raids. "Tell you what," Cole said. "I'll teach you something better. How to read sign, track animals, find water. Skills that'll keep you alive without killing anyone." "That's Indian knowledge," Daniel protested. "That's survival knowledge. Doesn't matter who taught it first if it keeps you breathing." The afternoon brought unwelcome visitors. Reverend Pike arrived with 3 members of the church board, their faces set in disapproving lines. Mrs. McKenna," Pike began, his voice carrying across the warehouse. "I see you've begun your educational experiment." "Indeed. We're studying arithmetic through practical applications." Beatrice didn't pause in showing Rosa how to calculate feed ratios for livestock. "With quite a mixed group," one of the board members observed, his gaze lingering on the Freeman children. "Education recognizes no color lines in my classroom," Beatrice said calmly. "All children deserve to read and write." "That's a dangerous philosophy," Pike warned. "One that could bring trouble to our peaceful town." Cole stepped out of the shadows where he'd been reinforcing a wall beam. "Only trouble I see is grown men intimidating children and their teacher." Pike's face flushed. "Mr. McKenna, I'd hoped marriage would settle your rebellious spirit." Funny thing about spirits, they don't settle on command. The tension stretched until young Grace Freeman began to cough a wet, rattling sound that spoke of chronic illness. Beatrice immediately went to her, feeling her forehead. "How long has she had this cough?" she asked Samuel. "Week, maybe 2, the boy admitted. Mama's been giving her honey tea." "She needs more than tea," Beatrice said, then looked at Pike. "Reverend, surely Christian charity extends to a sick child." Pike's mouth worked soundlessly. To refuse would expose his hypocrisy. To agree would acknowledge the humanity of children he preferred to ignore. "I'll send Doctor. Harkin," he said stiffly, then swept out with his entourage. After they left, Beatrice sagged slightly against her desk. Cole moved closer, not touching but offering presence. "They'll be back," she said quietly. Let them come. You've got something they don't, children who want to learn. That evening, Cole worked late in the warehouse, building proper desks from salvaged lumber while Beatrice graded the day's work at their crooked kitchen table. The familiar nightmare came that night, as it always did when he'd let his guard down during the day. The rope around his neck, Confederate voices laughing as they prepared to hang another Yankee spy, the wood creaking under his feet, his squad arriving just in time, bullets singing through Mississippi humidity. But in dreams, sometimes they came too late. He woke gasping on the porch, shirt soaked with sweat despite the cool night air. The door opened quietly, and Beatrice appeared with a cup of something that smelled of sage and herbs. "Drink," she said simply, sitting on the step beside his bedroll. "I'll be fine." "I know. Drink anyway." The tea was bitter but soothing. They sat in silence while his breathing steadied, watching stars wheel overhead. "How often?" she asked eventually. "Less than before, more than I'd like. My father had similar dreams from his war 1812. He said they never fully left, but they visited less frequently as years passed." She pulled her shawl tighter. "He used to walk at night when they came, miles and miles, until his body was too tired to remember." "Is that why you're awake, old habits?" "Partially. Also planning tomorrow's lessons. The Freeman children are far behind in basics, but quick learners. Hattie could already handle advanced texts if we had them. And the Morrison boys need different approaches entirely." "You love it," Cole interrupted softly. "Teaching. Is it that obvious? You light up when you talk about them, same as when you solve a problem on that board." She was quiet for a moment. "It's the only time I forget about this." She touched her birthmark. "When I'm teaching, I'm not the ugly schoolmarm. I'm just useful." "You're always useful, but not always seen that way." She stood, taking the empty cup. "Try to sleep. Tomorrow we're starting geography, and I need you to draw maps. Your hand is steadier than mine." Cole wanted to tell her that her hands were plenty steady, that she was seen as more than useful by anyone with eyes to truly look, but that verged on feelings neither of them could afford. So he merely nodded. The next morning brought drama in the form of a dust storm. It rolled across the prairie like a brown wall, sending townspeople scurrying for cover. Cole saw it coming and raced for the warehouse. "Storm!" he shouted, bursting through the door. "Bad one. Everyone away from the windows." Beatrice immediately took charge. "Older children, help the young ones. Wet cloths for breathing Hattie. The bucket Roberto. Help me with these shutters." They worked with swift efficiency, securing loose items and creating a shelter in the corner farthest from windows. The storm hit with a fury that shook the building, dust seeping through every crack. Cole pulled his bandana up and moved through the murk, checking children, reinforcing their shelter with overturned desks. The Martinez twins huddled together, trying to be brave. Grace Freeman coughed harder in the thick air. "Here." Cole lifted the girl, wrapping her in his coat to create a cleaner air pocket. "Breathe shallow, through the cloth." The storm raged for an hour. When it finally passed, they emerged coughing and dust-covered but whole. The warehouse had held, though barely. One wall showed new cracks, and the donated books were covered in grit. "Well," Beatrice said, surveying the damage with her typical calm, "today's lesson on weather patterns will be particularly vivid." Hattie laughed first. Then the others joined in the slightly hysterical laughter of survival. They spent the afternoon cleaning and repairing, the shared work bonding them more than any lesson could. Silas Throne appeared as they finished, his clothes suspiciously clean for someone who'd weathered the storm. "Quite a blow," he observed. "This old building took a beating. Be a shame if it was deemed unsafe for children." "It held fine," Cole said, not bothering to hide his antagonism. "For now, but winter's coming, and with it, worse storms. Snow load on that damaged roof." Throne shook his head theatrically. "I'd hate to see a tragedy." "What do you want, Mr. Throne?" Beatrice asked directly. "Just checking on our newest citizens. Oh, and delivering this." He produced an official-looking paper. "The territorial inspector will be visiting next month, evaluating whether this arrangement meets educational standards. I'm sure you'll want everything perfect." After he left, Beatrice studied the paper. "He's pushing for an inspection he knows we can't pass, not with the building in this condition. So we fix it. With what money I've spent my savings on books and supplies." Cole was quiet for a moment. "There's work at the railroad camp. Good money for someone who can handle a horse and gun." "No." Her response was immediate. "We'll find another way." The nickname slipped out unbidden. "Beatrice, those children need this school. If railroad money keeps it open." "Railroad money comes with railroad strings. Men who work those camps don't just handle horses. Cole, they handle trouble, strike breakers, claim jumpers." She met his eyes. "I won't have blood money funding education." He wanted to argue, but the fierce certainty in her face stopped him. This woman who'd married a stranger to save her school wouldn't compromise its foundation. That night, as they shared their usual quiet supper, a knock interrupted. Nettie stood at the door with a covered basket and a proposition. "Heard you need funds," she said without preamble. "I need help with the boarding house. Heavy work I can't manage anymore. Pays not much, but it's honest." "Nettie," Beatrice began. "Don't Nettie me. That school's the first good thing this town's seen in years. Besides," she winked at Cole, "keeps your man out of trouble and in sight. Win for everyone." Cole accepted with a grave nod. It was less money than railroad work, but enough. Maybe, if they were careful. The week progressed with small victories. Doctor, Harkin, pressured by conscience or Pike's order, examined Grace Freeman and left medicine for her cough. The Morrison boys began to question their father's teachings about Indians after Cole showed them how native tracking skills had saved soldiers' lives in the war. Hattie devoured every medical text Beatrice could find, even the damaged ones. "Says here nurses in the war saved more lives than doctors sometimes," she reported one afternoon, "just by keeping things clean." Florence Nightingale's influence. Beatrice confirmed. Cleanliness and careful observation, both excellent life skills, regardless of profession. "Is that why you make us wash hands before eating?" Tommy asked. Among other reasons. The children had taken to staying later each day, reluctant to return to homes where their education was seen as suspicious or worthless. Cole often found himself pressed into service, teaching knots one day, basic carpentry the next, always practical skills that parents couldn't object to. One evening, as October painted the mountains gold, he returned from Nettie's to find Beatrice teaching the older students to dance. "It's mathematics in motion," she explained, not meeting his amused gaze. "Patterns, timing, spatial relationships." "That's so." Cole leaned against the doorframe, watching Hattie guide a blushing Roberto through a simple reel. "Would you like to demonstrate?" Beatrice challenged. Unless dancing wasn't part of a soldier's education. He should have declined, should have maintained the careful distance their arrangement required. Instead, he stepped forward and offered his hand. "Tennessee waltz do." She placed her hand in his, and, for a moment, the warehouse transformed. No more cracked walls or dust or watching children. Just a man and woman moving to music only they could hear, her birthmark forgotten, his nightmares held at bay. "You're staring," she whispered. "You're worth staring at." The words hung between them like morning mist, beautiful and impossible to grasp. The spell broke when Tommy applauded, and suddenly they were teacher and temporary husband again, stepping apart with careful courtesy. But that night, Cole lay on his porch and remembered the weight of her hand in his, the way she'd smiled without thinking of hiding her face. Dangerous thoughts for a man planning to leave. Inside, Beatrice touched her birthmark and remembered how he'd looked at her not through or despite it. but as if it were simply part of a face he found worth watching. Dangerous thoughts for a woman who'd learned not to hope. Above them, the cracked bell caught the wind and sang its broken note, calling them to possibilities neither dared name. Not yet. Chapter 4. Fire in the Cave. The idea came to Beatrice on a crisp October morning as she watched Silas Throne's men loitering near the warehouse again. They'd been finding excuses to inspect the building daily, disrupting lessons with their heavy boots and loud voices. "We need a different classroom," she announced to Cole over breakfast. "Somewhere they can't interfere." Cole looked up from the harness he was mending one of Nettie's odd jobs. "What did you have in mind?" "You mentioned knowing the land around here. Are there any sheltered spaces, caves, overhangs?" A slow smile crossed his face. "Matter of fact, there is, about 2 miles up Miller's Creek. Natural cave with a spring. Used to camp there when I first arrived." That afternoon, they led an expedition. 10 students followed them up the winding creek path, the ones with shoes helping those without across the rocky stretches. Cole carried Grace Freeman on his shoulders, her cough better but strength still returning. Beatrice brought up the rear with supplies loaded on the gentle pack mule Jonah had lent them. "This is like when Moses led the Israelites," Tommy exclaimed, then caught himself. "That's Bible learning. Is that allowed?" "All learning is allowed," Beatrice assured him. "Knowledge doesn't compete, it complements." The cave proved perfect. A wide mouth opened onto a natural amphitheater of stone, with a freshwater spring trickling into a clear pool. The ceiling was high enough to stand, and afternoon light flooded the entrance. Ancient fire marks suggested others had found shelter here across the centuries. "Indians used it," Cole confirmed, pointing to faint pictographs on one wall. "See, that's the symbol for good water." Daniel Morrison traced the marks with newfound respect. They wrote stories on the walls. "Everything's a story if you know how to read it," Beatrice said. "These walls tell us about people who lived, loved, learned, just like us. Different time, same human hopes." They spent the day establishing their outdoor classroom. Cole and the older boys gathered firewood and cleared debris. The girls helped Beatrice create writing surfaces using flat stones and charcoal. Everyone contributed to building rough benches from fallen logs. "This is better than the warehouse," Hattie declared, testing the acoustics. Her voice echoed pleasingly. "Like God's own schoolroom." "Then let's be worthy students," Beatrice replied. As the afternoon waned, Cole taught them to read weather signs and cloud formations and wind patterns. "See how those clouds stack up like stairs? That means weather change coming. Probably by tomorrow night." "How do you know all this?" Rosa Martinez asked shyly. "Army Scouts taught me. Man named Jim Bridger could read the sky like a book. Saved our unit more than once." Cole pointed to a circling hawk. "What's that bird telling us?" The children pondered. Samuel Freeman raised his hand tentatively. "He's hunting, so there must be mice or rabbits below." "Good. What else?" "He's riding the air without flapping," Grace added in her whisper-soft voice. "So there's warm air rising?" Cole nodded approvingly. "Thermal currents. Same reason you'll see eagles circling at certain times. Nature's got lessons everywhere if we pay attention." The peaceful afternoon shattered when horses appeared on the trail below. 3 riders, 2 of Throne's men, and a stranger in a city suit who could only be the railroad agent Beatrice had been expecting. "Well, well," the lead rider called up. "Playing school in the dirt, Mrs. McKenna." Beatrice stepped forward, shielding the children instinctively. "We're conducting lessons in natural history. Mr. Garrett, is there a problem?" "Just wondering why the town's paying for a schoolhouse you ain't using." "The town isn't paying anything," she replied evenly. "And last I checked, education wasn't limited to 4 walls." The railroad agent dismounted, climbing the slope with surprising agility. Up close, he appeared younger than expected, with intelligent eyes that took in the scene analytically. "Mrs. McKenna, I'm Simon Caro, Pacific Railroad surveyor. I understand you're the new educator. I am. She didn't offer her hand, sensing a trap. Interesting classroom. Caro examined the cave mouth, then the children. His gaze lingered on the Freeman siblings and the Martinez twins. Very progressive. Education should progress, Mr. Caro. Otherwise, we're just repeating ignorance. Indeed. He produced a notebook. I'm surveying potential routes for the rail expansion. This area's been marked as a possibility. Cole stepped beside Beatrice. Railroads already got a route through the valley. Markets change. Mr. McKenna. Progress demands adaptation. Caro's smile was practiced. Though I'm sure you understand the benefits of cooperation with inevitable development. The threat was politely delivered, but unmistakable. Beatrice felt the children tense behind her. We should head back, she said calmly. The light's fading. The return journey was subdued. The children sensing adult currents they couldn't fully understand. Cole took point, every sense alert for trouble, while Beatrice comforted those made anxious by the encounter. That evening, after the students dispersed to their homes, Cole and Beatrice sat by their fireplace discussing implications. They want the cave, she said flatly. Probably the whole creek line, natural water source for steam engines. Or they want leverage over you. Cole poked the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. Give up the school, or lose your outdoor classroom too. Then we'll have to be smarter. She pulled out her teaching journal, making notes. Tomorrow we'll start earlier, post rotating lookouts. If they want to disrupt lessons, they'll have to work for it. A knock interrupted. Jonah Reyes entered. Shaking early snow from his coat, the weather change Cole had predicted arriving exactly on time. Thought you should know, the deputy said without preamble. Caro's been asking questions in town about you, Cole, your war record, where you've been since... Cole's hand instinctively moved toward his collar. Find anything interesting? Enough to know you were more than just cavalry. Enough to make him curious why a man with your skills is hauling water for a schoolmarm. Jonah accepted the coffee Beatrice offered. He also asked about your marriage, how sudden it was. Let him ask, Beatrice said firmly. We've broken no laws. No, but men like Caro don't need laws when they have money and influence. Jonah hesitated. There's more. Throne's been meeting with some of the town council. Word is he's proposing to buy the schoolhouse land himself, then lease it to the railroad. Can he do that? If he gets enough votes, or if the territorial inspector declares the building unfit. Jonah met their eyes grimly. That inspection's been moved up, next week instead of next month. After the deputy left, Cole and Beatrice sat in heavy silence. Finally, she spoke. I won't give up. I know. Those children need... Her voice cracked slightly. Grace Freeman would die this winter without the food I make sure she gets at lunch. Hattie would end up married to some miner. Her brilliant mind wasted. The Martinez twins would never learn enough English to escape the railroad camps. I know, Cole repeated softly. So what do we do? He was quiet for a long moment, then made a decision that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. We make it real. What? The marriage. We make it real enough that no one can question it. Move my things inside, attend church together, play the devoted couple. He met her shocked gaze. It's the one thing they're not expecting us actually trying. Cole... She stood, pacing to the window where snow now fell steadily. That's more than I can ask. You're not asking. I'm offering. He joined her at the window. Careful not to touch. Those kids deserve their chance, if my presence helps give it to them. And when you leave, the question hung between them like icicles beautiful, sharp, destined to fall. We'll handle that when it comes. She turned to face him fully. Why really, why not the easy answer about bullies or helping? Why do you care what happens to a scarred schoolmarm and her ragtag students? Cole thought of all the careful walls he'd built, all the distances he'd maintained. Then he thought of Grace Freeman's trusting weight on his shoulders, of Hattie's fierce determination, of Tommy's hero worship slowly transforming into something better respect for learning. Maybe, he said slowly, because for the first time since the war, I'm building something instead of destroying it. Beatrice studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. All right, we do this properly then. You'll need to move your things inside before the storm worsens. They worked together, transferring his few possessions from the porch to the small second bedroom. It felt like crossing a bridge that couldn't be uncrossed. Each item placed inside another step towards something neither fully understood. The storm intensified as night fell, wind howling around the corners of their small house. They prepared for bed with new awareness, no longer strangers playing roles, but partners in something that was becoming real through necessity. Cole paused at his bedroom door. Beatrice? Yes. That dance, in the warehouse. I meant what I said. She touched her birthmark self-consciously. People say things when they're dancing. I don't. He closed the door before she could respond, leaving her standing in the hallway with one hand pressed to her marked cheek and something warm unfurling in her chest despite the cold wind rattling the windows. The next morning brought 2 feet of snow and a world transformed. Cole woke to find Beatrice already up, stoking the fire and preparing breakfast with efficient movements. We'll never make it to the cave in this, she said by way of greeting. Then we bring the cave here. Cole accepted the coffee gratefully. Clear the front room. Set up lessons by the fire. Any parent who lets their child out in this weather won't complain about location. Only 4 students made it through the snow. Hattie, who'd walked 2 miles with rags wrapped around her boots. Tommy Morrison, who'd snuck out while his parents argued. And, surprisingly, both Freeman children, brought by their mother on her way to work. They learn, or they got nothing. Mrs. Freeman said simply, her dignity intact despite patched clothes and exhaustion. I'll be back after dark. The intimate setting created a different kind of classroom. They sat in a circle by the fire while wind howled outside. And Beatrice taught mathematics through baking bread measurements, temperatures, timing. Cole showed them how to maintain a fire in harsh weather, how to insulate with newspaper, how to read the subtle differences in snow that meant safe passage or danger. My ma says this marriage is fake, Tommy announced suddenly during lunch. Says you 2 are just pretending so, Mrs. Beatrice can keep teaching. The room went very still. Hattie glared at the younger boy, but Cole held up a hand. What do you think, Tommy? The boy squirmed. I don't know. You seem real to me. The way you look at each other when you think nobody's watching. Do we? Beatrice's voice was carefully neutral. Like my PA used to look at my ma before she died. Tommy's young face was earnest. Like you're seeing something nobody else can see. Grace Freeman nodded solemnly. You take care of each other. That's what married folks do. Right. From the mouths of babes. Cole thought. Right, he said aloud. That's exactly what they do. The afternoon brought unexpected warmth to the snowbound house. Hattie read aloud from a medical text while the younger children worked problems on their slates. Cole found himself watching Beatrice as she moved between students. Patience infinite, marking her students' work by firelight. When had her birthmark stopped being the first thing he saw? When had her steady gray eyes become the feature that drew him? When had this arrangement become something he didn't want to end? The questions followed him as he helped bundle the children for their journey home through the settling snow. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, inspectors and railroad men and all the forces arrayed against one determined woman and her belief that every child deserved to learn. But tonight, as they cleaned up from the day's lessons, Cole allowed himself to imagine staying, not just through winter or until the school was established, but staying the way roots stay in soil deep and permanent and nourishing something worth growing. Penny for your thoughts, Beatrice asked, drying dishes beside him. Just thinking about tomorrow's lessons. He lied. She smiled, seeing through him as always. Tomorrow will come regardless. Tonight, we're warm and safe and useful. Is that enough? It's more than I had a month ago. She hung the dish towel carefully. More than I expected to have. Later, as the storm continued its assault on their small shelter, Cole heard Beatrice moving in her room. He lay in his narrow bed thinking about bridges crossed and distances closing, about children who saw truth despite adult deceptions, about a woman who made usefulness look like beauty. Outside, the wind sang through the mountains like a cracked bell calling souls to account. Inside, two people pretended to be married while something real took root in the space between their careful boundaries. The storm would pass, the inspector would come. Battles would be fought over land and rights, and the radical idea that education belonged to everyone. But tonight, they were just Cole and Beatrice, learning the hardest lesson of all, how to let someone in when every instinct said to keep the world at arm's length. Tomorrow's struggles could wait. Tonight, the fire was warm, the roof was sound, and hope had found its way inside despite the storm. Chapter 5, Fire on the Prairie. The smoke was visible from 3 miles away, a black column rising against the November sky like an accusation. Cole spotted it first, pulling up his horse as he returned from Nettie's with supplies. "Fire," he said to the wind, and spurred his mount toward town. By the time he reached Main Street, half of Sagebrush Bend had gathered to watch the warehouse burn. The flames had already consumed the east wall where Beatrice kept her books. Students huddled with their parents, some crying, others staring in shock at their schoolhouse becoming ash. "Where's Beatrice?" Cole grabbed Jonah's arm. "She got everyone out," the deputy said, coughing from smoke. "But Hattie went back, said there were medical texts that couldn't be replaced." Cole didn't wait to hear more. He plunged through the crowd toward the inferno, stripping off his coat as he ran. The heat hit him like a physical wall, awakening memories of Atlanta burning. But he pushed through. Hattie. He found her near what had been the supply corner, trying to drag a chest of books through the smoke. "Leave them." "Mrs. Beatrice needs these." The girl's face was streaked with soot and tears. "They're all she has." "She needs you alive more than any books." Cole grabbed Hattie around the waist, ignoring her protests, and carried her toward the exit. A beam crashed behind them, sending up a shower of sparks. They burst into clean air just as more of the roof collapsed. Beatrice ran to them, her own face blackened with ash. "Hattie, oh God, Cole!" She pulled them both into a fierce embrace, propriety forgotten. "You foolish, brave girl. You foolish, brave man." "The books," Hattie sobbed. "I couldn't save the books." "Books can be replaced," Beatrice said firmly, though Cole saw the devastation in her eyes. "You cannot." The fire brigade had given up trying to save the warehouse, focusing instead on keeping the flames from spreading. As the three of them stood watching months of work turn to smoke, Silas Throne appeared, impeccably clean despite the chaos. "What a tragedy," he said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. "All those supplies, those books, such a setback for education." He turned to the crowd. "Perhaps this is a sign. Maybe Sagebrush Bend isn't meant to have a school after all." "Or maybe," Cole said quietly, "it's a sign that someone doesn't want us to have one." Throne's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation. Drifter." "Just an observation. Funny how the fire started in the corner where you were inspecting yesterday." "Are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting," Beatrice interrupted, her teacher's voice carrying over the crowd, "that we focus on what matters. Children need to continue learning. We'll find another way." "With what?" Throne spread his hands. "The territorial inspector arrives in 3 days. You have no building, no supplies, no— We have everything that matters." Beatrice said, We have students who want to learn and a community that hopefully values their future more than petty politics. She looked around at the gathered townspeople. Some met her gaze steadily, Nettie nodding approval. A few parents whose children had begun to thrive. Others looked away, ashamed or indifferent. Classes will continue tomorrow. Beatrice announced, "At the cave, weather permitting. At my home, if not, any child who wants to learn is welcome." As the crowd dispersed, Cole noticed something odd. The wind had shifted during the fire, blowing sparks back toward Throne's own property. His horse barn had caught, though quickly controlled, but in the rush to fight that secondary fire, something had been exposed survey stakes and cleared ground where no construction had been announced. "Jonah," Cole called quietly. "Might want to look at what's behind Throne's barn." The deputy nodded and slipped away. Beatrice, meanwhile, was surrounded by her students, all talking at once, pledging to help rebuild Mrs. Freeman pressed a worn dollar into Beatrice's hand. "For new books," she said simply. "Education's worth more than eating." "I can't." "You can and will. My babies are learning to read because of you. That's worth everything." That evening, Cole and Beatrice sat in their small kitchen, exhaustion weighing heavy. She'd salvaged what she could: a few slates, some chalk, the attendance ledger she always carried. Everything else was gone. "I'm sorry," Cole said finally, "for what you saved Hattie. You've been saving us all since you arrived." She traced patterns on the scarred table. I had lesson plans for the whole winter. Reading primers I'd bought with my last savings. That medical text Hattie loved. We'll get more." With what money? The despair she'd hidden all day finally showed. "I've spent everything. Throne will make sure no one donates now. He'll spin this as God's judgment on my progressive ideas." A knock interrupted. Jonah entered without waiting, his face grim but satisfied. "Found something interesting behind that barn," he said. "Survey markers. Official railroad ones. And this." He laid a paper on the table, a land transfer document. Draft version. But it shows Throne selling the warehouse land to Pacific Railroad for 10 times what it's worth. Dated a week ago. Before the fire, Beatrice breathed. Hard to sell occupied land. Empty land that's been cleared by fire, though. Jonah shrugged. "Can't prove he said it, but this is mighty suspicious." "Caro," Cole said. "He's in on it. Has to be." Maybe Throne's playing his own game." Jonah pocketed the document. "I'll dig deeper. Meanwhile, you two should know there's talk in town. Some folks are saying the fire was Beatrice's fault for teaching mixed classes. Others are remembering how their kids came home excited about learning." After Jonah left, Cole found Beatrice standing on the porch, staring at the distant glow where the warehouse still smoldered. "It's not over," he said. "No," she laughed bitterly. "The inspector will come, find no school, and recommend closing the whole enterprise. Throne wins, the railroad wins, the children lose." "You're forgetting something." "What's that?" "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." He moved beside her, close enough to share warmth against the cold night. "And I've gotten pretty fond of that stubbornness." She turned to look at him. Really look. And something shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained, already eroded by weeks of proximity, crumbled entirely. "Cole," she whispered. "This wasn't supposed to—" "I know." He touched her face gently, thumb brushing the edge of her birthmark. "Nothing about this was supposed to happen, but here we are." She leaned into his touch for a moment, then pulled back. The children need to see that sometimes good people stand together against bad circumstances." He let his hand fall but maintained eye contact. "They need to see that different kinds of people can build something worthwhile together. Is that what we're doing, building something?" "Aren't we?" The question hung between them until another knock shattered the moment. This time it was three parents, the Martinezes and Mrs. Morrison, Tommy's mother. So, Mrs. McKenna. Maria Martinez began in careful English. We have been talking. Our children, they are different since your school. Better, happier. Roberto reads to me now. Her husband added. In English and Spanish both. This is miraculous. Mrs. Morrison stepped forward. What I mean to say is, we want to help. My husband has lumber from our old barn. The Martinezes know construction. Others will help too, if you'll have us. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. Yes, of course. We cannot let them win, Maria said fiercely. Men like Throne, they think we are nothing. But our children will be more. After they left, promising to spread word about rebuilding, Beatrice finally allowed herself to cry. Cole held her as sobs shook her frame, all the day's fear and anger and grief pouring out. I thought I'd lost everything, she whispered against his shirt. You haven't lost anything that matters. Haven't I? She pulled back to look at him. Cole, Another interruption, this time Hattie with several students in tow, their arms full of salvaged items. We saved what we could, Hattie announced. And look, she produced a slightly charred book. One of the medical texts survived. It's about battlefield medicine fitting. Right. The children dispersed their treasures, partially burned books. Slates cracked but usable. Even the bell that had somehow survived with its crack now joined by scorch marks. It still rings, Tommy demonstrated, producing a warped but determined sound. Different, but it works. Like us, Cole thought, watching Beatrice organize the salvaged items with renewed energy. Different, damaged, but still working. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Simon Caro appeared at their door. His city suit replaced by practical clothes. His expression troubled. I need to speak with you both, he said, about Throne and the railroad. Cole's hand moved to his gun, but Beatrice gestured him to stillness. Come in, Mr. Caro. The railroad man sat uncomfortably at their kitchen table. I'm not who Throne thinks I am, he began. Yes, I work for the railroad, but I'm also tasked with investigating corruption in land acquisitions. Throne's scheme, it's not sanctioned by the company. You knew about the fire? Cole's voice was dangerous. I suspected he might try something. I didn't expect... Caro shook his head. Children could have died. That's beyond any acceptable business practice. What do you want? Beatrice asked directly. To make this right, the railroad needs this town's goodwill for legitimate expansion. Throne's making us all look like criminals. He produced a leather portfolio. I can't prove he set the fire, but I can prove he's been falsifying survey records. That's federal crime. Why tell us? Because you're the only honest people I've found here, and because... He looked at Beatrice. My sister was a teacher. Back in Boston. She had a birthmark too, though smaller. I watched how the world treated her for it. Watched her fight for every student who didn't fit the mold. He stood. The real inspector isn't coming in 3 days. That was Throne's lie to pressure you. The actual inspection is in 2 weeks. That gives us time. After Caro left, promising to return with proof of Throne's crimes, Cole and Beatrice stood in their small parlor, processing this reversal. Do we trust him? Cole asked. Do we have a choice? Beatrice moved to the window where students were already gathering despite having no proper classroom. Look at them, Cole. They're coming anyway, because learning matters more than buildings. He joined her at the window, slipping an arm around her waist. This time, she didn't pull away. Then we'd better get teaching, he said. She looked up at him, hope and something deeper in her eyes. He confirmed. For as long as it takes. She stretched up and kissed him then, soft and sure and tasting of promise. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, she smiled. Mr. McKenna, I do believe you're developing a dangerous attachment to this town. Not to the town, he corrected, pulling her close again. To its schoolmarm. Turns out marrying her was the luckiest mistake I ever made. Outside, the students had discovered the salvage bell and were taking turns making it ring its broken note. The sound carried across the valley damaged but determined, calling everyone to account for what truly mattered. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but today, in a small house on the edge of town, two people who'd thought themselves too damaged for love discovered that broken things could still make music. The prairie wind carried smoke and ash and the sound of children laughing, ready to learn wherever their teacher would have them. And in that laughter was revolution quiet, persistent, unstoppable. Throne had burned a building, but what Beatrice and Cole were building together, that was made of sterner stuff than wood and nails. That was made of hearts that refused to quit and minds that refused to close. The real fire was just beginning. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 6. The luckiest mistake of my life. The Beaver Creek Hall had never seen such a crowd. Every bench was occupied, people standing along the walls, children perched on their parents' shoulders to see over the mass of humanity. The territorial inspector had arrived that morning not in 3 days as Throne had threatened, but exactly 2 weeks after the fire, just as Caro had promised. Beatrice stood at the front of the hall, wearing her best dress, still simple brown wool, but pressed and clean. Cole beside her in his one good shirt, the collar hiding most of his scar. Their students sat in the front rows, scrubbed and nervous but present. This hearing will come to order, Mayor Dawson announced, sweating despite the November chill. We're here to evaluate the fitness of Mrs. McKenna's educational enterprise. Reverend Pike rose first, his black coat making him look like a carrion bird. I speak for the moral conscience of this community when I say that recent events have proven the danger of progressive education. A building burned. Through no fault of the school. Jonah interrupted from his position by the door. Deputy Reyes, you'll have your turn, the mayor said weakly. Pike continued, outlining every deviation from traditional education, mixed races learning together, girls studying mathematics, secular subjects taught alongside scripture. His supporters murmured agreement, though Cole noticed their numbers were fewer than before. Furthermore, Pike built to his crescendo. Mrs. McKenna has corrupted the sacred institution of marriage itself, entering into an arrangement of convenience that makes a mockery of Christian union. That's enough. Cole stood, his quiet voice somehow carrying over the murmurs. You want to attack the school, attack it, but you leave my wife out of your sanctimonious speeches. Your wife, Throne, rose from his seat among the town council, smile sharp. How touching. Tell us, Mr. McKenna, how long did you know your bride before this sudden marriage day's hours? Long enough. Long enough for what to compromise her reputation so thoroughly that... Long enough to recognize courage when I saw it. Cole's voice remained level, but Beatrice saw his hand clench. Long enough to see a woman willing to stand alone against the prejudice of small minds and smaller hearts. Pretty words, Throne sneered. But we have evidence of a different sort. He produced a document with theatrical flair. A signed statement that Mrs. McKenna agreed to transfer the warehouse land to my ownership. Beatrice gasped. That's a lie I never signed. Your signature is right here. Throne displayed the paper, witnessed and notarized. By whom? The new voice came from the territorial inspector, a thin man named Harrison who'd remained silent until now. May I see that document? Throne handed it over reluctantly. Harrison studied it, then looked up with sharp eyes. This is dated after the fire. How could Mrs. McKenna sign away rights to a building that no longer existed? Well, the land itself. The land belongs to the town, not to any individual. It cannot be sold without a council vote. Harrison set the document aside. This appears to be fraudulent. I can explain, Caro said, rising from his seat near the back. The crowd turned, surprised to see the railroad man. That signature was forged. I have proof. He walked forward, producing his leather portfolio. Mr. Throne has been falsifying documents for months. Land surveys, ownership papers, even this supposed transfer. I've been investigating on behalf of Pacific Railroad, which does not condone illegal activities by those claiming to represent our interests. This is ridiculous, Throne blustered. You can't prove. Actually, I can. Caro laid out document after document. Especially since your associate, Mr. Garrett, was quite talkative when faced with federal charges. He's already in custody in Cheyenne. The hall erupted. Throne supporters fell silent while parents who'd seen their children flourish under Beatrice's teaching began shouting for justice. Mayor Dawson pounded his gavel futilely. Order. We must have order. Harrison stood, his authority quieting the crowd. I've seen enough regarding the land dispute. Now I'd like to hear about the actual education taking place. One by one, the students stood to speak. Hattie went first, explaining how she'd learned more practical medicine in 2 months than in all her previous schooling. She produced the charred medical text, showing pages of notes she'd made in the margins. Mrs. McKenna teaches us to think, not just memorize, she said firmly. That's what education should be. Tommy Morrison followed, reading a composition about how learning to track and observe from Cole had helped him save his family's chickens from a fox. I used to think Indians were savages, he admitted, glancing at his parents. Now I know they were smart about living on the land. That's important learning. The Freeman children stood together, Grace's voice stronger after weeks of proper food and medicine. Mrs. McKenna makes sure we eat lunch, she said simply. And she teaches everyone the same, no matter what color they are. That's precisely the problem. Pike interjected. Mixing races, teaching Indian ways, promoting equality where God ordained hierarchy. Where exactly did God ordain that? Beatrice asked quietly. I must have missed that verse. I did find, suffer the little children to come unto me. But perhaps your Bible has different words. The crowd stirred. Some of Pike's own congregation looked thoughtful. Roberto Martinez spoke next. In English, he couldn't have managed 2 months prior. My papa works hard on railroad. He wants better for us. Mrs. McKenna gives better. She teaches us to read and write and count so we can be more than our parents. That is American dream. No. Parent after parent stood then, testifying not about ideology but about results. Children coming home excited about learning. Families reading together for the first time. Young minds opening to possibilities beyond Sagebrush Bend's dusty streets. Harrison listened intently, making notes. Finally, he asked, Mrs. McKenna, do you have anything to add? Beatrice stood, and Cole saw her hand shake slightly before she clasped them together. Only this. Education isn't about creating conformity. It's about unlocking potential. Every child who's spoken today had that potential already. I just helped them find it. And this unusual marriage? Harrison's tone was neutral. Before Beatrice could answer, Cole stood beside her. I'd like to address that. The hall grew quiet. Cole McKenna rarely spoke in public, and never at length. His words now carried the weight of that silence. You all know how this started, he began. Reverend Pike and Mr. Throne decided that helping a woman prepare a schoolroom was scandalous. They demanded we marry or see the school closed before it opened. He looked directly at Throne. They ordered me to wed the ugliest schoolmarm in the territory, thinking to humiliate us both into leaving. Beatrice flinched at the words, but Cole took her hand firmly. Turns out, he continued, his voice carrying clear across the hall, it was the luckiest mistake I ever made. He turned to face Beatrice fully, speaking to her now rather than the crowd. I've known beautiful women who were ugly inside. I've known scarred soldiers with souls full of light. This woman, my wife, has more beauty in her determination to teach one child to read than all the pretty faces that would turn away from that same child's need. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, her free hand touching her birthmark unconsciously. So yes, Cole addressed the crowd again. We married because of your prejudice and manipulation. But we stay married because I wake every morning grateful to be beside someone who fights for others' futures. That's not convenience. That's conviction. The silence that followed was profound. Then Nettie began clapping, slow and deliberate. Others joined the Martinezes, Mrs. Freeman, parents who'd seen their children bloom. Soon half the hall was applauding while the other half sat in uncomfortable silence. Harrison raised a hand for quiet. I have one more question. About the fire. I can answer that, a new voice said from the doorway. A woman entered one of Throne's own servants. I can't stay quiet anymore. Not after hearing these children speak. She faced her employer defiantly. I saw you that night, Mr. Throne. Saw you leave the warehouse just before the flames started. Saw the oil can in your barn after. You lying? Throne started forward, but Jonah stepped between them. Ma'am, are you willing to testify to this officially? The deputy asked. I am. Those children could have died. I can't live with protecting a man who'd risk that. The hall erupted again. Throne's remaining supporters melted away as the implications sank in. Attempted murder, arson, fraud. The charges would be severe. I believe I've heard enough, Harrison announced. Deputy Reyes, please take Mr. Throne into custody pending federal investigation. Reverend Pike, I suggest you consider whether your position here remains tenable given your collaboration in these schemes. As Jonah led a protesting Throne away, Harrison turned to Beatrice. Mrs. McKenna, not only do I approve your school, I'm recommending territorial funding to help rebuild. Education like yours is exactly what Wyoming needs. The celebration that followed was chaotic and joyful. Students hugged their teacher, parents shook Cole's hand, and even some former detractors approached with sheepish apologies. We misjudged, Mrs. Wellington admitted stiffly. Your methods are unconventional, but the results speak plainly. As the crowd finally dispersed, Caro approached the couple. The railroad will contribute to rebuilding as well. We need communities that value progress through education, not corruption. Why? Beatrice asked. What changed your mind? You did, both of you. He smiled sadly. My sister died young. Never got to see her school succeed. Helping yours feels like completion. That evening, Cole and Beatrice walked home through streets dusted with early snow. The mountain peaks glowed pink with sunset. And somewhere, a wolf called to its pack, not threatening now, but part of the landscape they'd claimed together. Did you mean it? Beatrice asked quietly. What you said in the hall. Cole stopped walking, turning her to face him. Every word. Even the part about being grateful each morning. Especially that part. He cupped her face gently, thumb tracing the edge of her birthmark. This mark, it's not a flaw. It's a map. It led you here, to these children, to this work, to me. Cole, her voice broke. I love you, Beatrice McKenna. Not in spite of anything, not because of circumstances. I love your stubborn brilliance and your fierce compassion and, yes, your beautiful, marked, perfect face. She kissed him then, there in the middle of Main Street where anyone could see, when they broke apart, both breathless. She smiled through her tears. I love you too, you difficult, wonderful man, even though you were supposed to leave. Plans change, he said simply. Good thing too, Miriam wrote she's coming to visit. Wants to meet the woman who finally stopped my wandering. Your sister when? Christmas. Thought maybe she could help with the school. She has teaching experience too. Beatrice laughed, the sound bright in the winter air. A whole family of teachers Throne never stood a chance. They walked on, hand in hand, past the empty lot where the warehouse had stood. Come spring, a proper schoolhouse would rise there brick this time, with room for all who wanted to learn. "You know what this means," Beatrice said as they climbed their porch steps. "What's that?" "No more sleeping on porches. No more careful distances. This is real now. All of it." Cole pulled her close, backing her against their door. "Been real for a while now. We just finally admitted it." "To the whole town," she agreed, breathless. "To ourselves," he corrected, and kissed her again. Inside their small house, the fire crackled warmly. Books salvaged from the fire stood on new shelves Cole had built. The cracked school bell hung by the door, ready to ring in the morning for classes that would continue no matter what. They'd won more than a legal battle today. They'd won the right to build a future together, scarred and imperfect and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. Outside, snow began falling in earnest, covering the old wounds of the town in pristine white. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was for celebrating impossible victories and unexpected love. In the distance, a train whistle echoed across the valley, not a threat now, but a promise. The world was coming to Sagebrush Bend, and thanks to a determined schoolmarm and the drifter who'd stayed, the town's children would be ready to meet it. The luckiest mistake indeed. ***, Part 7, Through the White Storm. The blizzard struck without mercy 3 days before Christmas. Just as the prison wagon carrying Silas Throne toward Cheyenne reached Miller's Pass, Cole heard about the accident from a frantic rider who barely made it through the growing storm. "Wagon overturned," the man gasped, ice coating his beard. "Marshall's hurt bad, Throne got loose. And there's children missing. The widow Patterson's young ones were traveling to their aunt's place, lost in the white." Cole was already reaching for his coat when Beatrice grabbed his arm. "The Patterson children, that's Mary and little James. They're only 7 and 5. "I know." He strapped on his gun belt with practiced efficiency. "How many others are searching?" "Can't tell. Storm came up so fast. Deputy Reyes headed out an hour ago with 2 men, but visibility's near nothing now." Through their window, the world had vanished into a howling white void. Wind shrieked around the corners of their house like something alive and angry. This wasn't just a storm, it was the kind of killing blizzard that left frozen corpses come spring. "I'm coming with you," Beatrice said. "No. Those children know me. If they're frightened, hiding." "Bea." He caught her shoulders gently but firmly. "Someone needs to coordinate from here. When others come looking for help, you'll direct them. You'll keep the fire going and prepare for survivors. That's just as important." She wanted to argue, he could see it in her eyes, but she nodded, understanding the harsh mathematics of survival. Take the rope from the barn and the lamp oil. Cole bundled into every layer he owned, wrapping his face until only his eyes showed. At the door, Beatrice caught him once more. "Come back," she said simply. "That's your only job. Find them if you can, but come back." He kissed her quickly, tasting desperation and promise. Always. The storm swallowed him 3 feet from the porch. Cole had survived blizzards before, but this was something primeval. The wind didn't just blow, it attacked, seeking every gap in clothing, driving ice crystals like needles into exposed skin. He could barely see his hand extended before him. Using techniques learned from a Lakota scout years ago, he navigated by ground feel and instinct. The road to Miller's Pass ran northwest, if the wagon overturned near Devil's Bend. As the rider suggested, the children might have sought shelter in the rocky outcroppings there, or they might have wandered into the open prairie, in which case they were already dead. Cole pushed that thought away and pressed on. Time dissolved in the white fury. He might have been walking minutes or hours when he literally stumbled over Jonah Reyes. The deputy was half buried in a drift, his horse dead beside him. Cole dug him out, slapping his face until consciousness returned. "Cole," Jonah's words were slurred with cold. "Children, saw tracks, heading to Eagle Rock." "Can you make it back to town?" "Don't know." Cole made a quick decision. He hoisted Jonah onto his back in a fireman's carry. The extra weight was brutal, but leaving the man meant death. He staggered back the way he'd come, finding his own rapidly filling footprints by feel more than sight. The journey back nearly killed them both. Twice Cole fell, Jonah's weight driving him into drifts. His lungs burned from frozen air. His legs shook with exhaustion. But then, miracle of miracles, a light pierced the white hell. Beatrice had hung every lantern they owned in the windows. He crashed through their door, depositing Jonah by the fire where Beatrice already had blankets and hot water waiting. She worked with smooth efficiency, stripping the deputy's frozen clothes, wrapping him in warmth, forcing hot tea between his blue lips. Eagle Rock, Cole gasped when he could speak. Jonah saw tracks heading there. That's 2 miles north. Beatrice's face was grave. In this storm? I know. He was already checking his gear, refilling his flask with hot coffee. But it's shelter, if they made it there. You can't go back out. You're exhausted. And their children. He met her eyes. What would you do? She was silent for a moment, then began packing a bag with medical supplies. Eagle Rock has that overhang on the south side. If they're smart, they'll be there. Take these. She handed him small bottles. Laudanum for pain, whiskey for warmth, and this. She pressed something into his hand, a small compass that had been her father's. The needle glows in the dark. It might help. He pocketed it along with fresh lamp oil. At the door, she caught him again. I mean it, Cole McKenna. You come back, or I'll come looking for you myself. Stubborn woman. Lucky for you. The second journey into the storm was worse. His body screamed for rest, but those children had been out here for hours now. Eagle Rock was their only chance, a massive boulder formation that created natural windbreaks and shallow caves. Cole fought for every step, using the compass when the wind died enough to see it. North, always north. When he fell, he crawled. When crawling became impossible, he rested just long enough to find strength for one more push. Then, different snow underfoot, rock snow, thin and wind-scoured. He'd reached the formation's edge, working by feel along the base. He searched for the overhang, calling out when the wind allowed. Nothing, nothing. Then, was that a sound or just wind through stone? He called again, and this time heard a definite response, a child crying. Following the sound, he found them huddled in the deepest part of the overhang, Mary Patterson clutching her little brother, both blue with cold but alive. And with them, unexpected, was Hattie Bloom. Mr. McKenna. Hattie's voice was hoarse. I was riding to the Peterson farm for nursing practice when the storm hit, found these two wandering. You saved their lives, Cole said, already working to wrap the children in the blankets he'd brought. Little James was barely conscious, his small body shaking uncontrollably. Mary seemed stronger but disoriented. Can we move them? Hattie asked. Cole assessed grimly. The boy wouldn't make 2 miles in this condition. They needed heat, shelter, time. We ford up here, he decided. Build a fire, warm them. Wait for a break in the storm. With what wood? Cole smiled grimly and pulled out his knife. Good thing I wore my old boots. He cut the leather into strips, soaking them with lamp oil. It wouldn't burn long, but it might be enough. Hattie helped him build a windscreen from rocks while the children huddled together. The makeshift fire caught, giving precious minutes of warmth. Tell them stories. Cole instructed Hattie while feeding the fire carefully. Keep them awake. Keep them talking. Hattie rose to the occasion, spinning tales of her future medical practice, of the new school being built, of all the things they'd learn come spring. Her voice competed with the wind, creating a bubble of human warmth in the frozen world. But their fuel ran low too quickly. Cole sacrificed his coat lining, then his spare shirt. The children's color improved slightly, but the storm showed no signs of breaking. That's when they heard the gunshot. 3 shots, evenly spaced the universal signal for location. Cole answered with his own pistol, hoping the sound would carry. Minutes later, A figure materialized from the white Simon Caro. Of all people, leading a string of horses. "Beatrice sent me," he shouted over the wind. "Said you'd need help getting back. Smart woman. Your wife." They bundled the children onto horses, Hattie riding with Mary, Cole carrying James against his chest. The journey back was a nightmare of wind and cold. But Caro had brought rope, and they stayed connected, following his knowledge of the terrain. Just when Cole thought they'd missed the town entirely, lights appeared not just from his house, but from dozens of windows. The whole town had lit beacons to guide them home. Beatrice met them at the door, taking James from Cole's arms with practiced efficiency. The house had been transformed into a makeshift hospital. Doctor Harkin was already there, working on Jonah, and immediately began examining the children. "Frostbite on the boy's toes," he announced after tense minutes. "But we caught it in time. They'll both recover fully." The relief was overwhelming. Cole slumped into a chair, suddenly aware of his own frozen extremities. Beatrice knelt before him, pulling off his boots, checking for damage with gentle hands. "Your feet are like ice," she scolded softly. "What did you do to your boots?" "Burned them, for the fire." Her hand stilled. "You burned your boots, in a blizzard, to keep children warm." Seemed like the thing to do at the time. She looked up at him with eyes bright with tears. "Cole McKenna, you impossible, wonderful fool." The storm continued through the night, but inside was warmth and life. The Patterson children slept peacefully, their color returning. Hattie, proclaimed a hero by everyone, blushed at the praise but glowed with the knowledge that she'd saved lives, real medical work, not just theory. "I made the right choices," she kept saying wonderingly. "Everything misses. McKenna taught about emergency medicine. I remembered it all." As dawn approached, bringing calmer weather, unexpected news arrived. Silas Throne had been found frozen to death a mile from the overturned wagon. He'd escaped custody only to meet justice from nature itself. "Can't say I'm sorry," Nettie declared, ladling out soup to the assembled crowd. "Man would have let children die for profit. Seems fitting the winter took him." Reverend Pike, notably absent during the rescue efforts, would leave town within the week, his congregation having seen clearly where Christian charity truly resided. But those were concerns for later. Now, in the warm kitchen crowded with neighbors, Cole sat with Beatrice pressed against his side, watching their community care for its own. The storm had tested them all and found them not wanting. "You know what this means," Beatrice murmured. "What's that?" "You're a hero. Again, the town will never let you leave now." Cole pulled her closer. "Good thing I wasn't planning to." Caro approached them, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I owe you both an apology. When I first came here, I saw obstacles to progress, numbers on a map. But tonight," he gestured to the room full of people caring for each other, "this is what progress really looks like." "You helped save them too," Beatrice pointed out. "Only because you taught me something worth saving exists here." He paused. "The railroad will donate funds for the new school. Proper funds, not schemes. We want to invest in communities like this." As the morning sun finally broke through dissipating clouds, it revealed a world transformed by white, but also a community transformed by crisis into something stronger. The children were safe, the corrupt were gone, and spring would bring new beginnings built on the foundation of this terrible, wonderful night. Cole looked down at Beatrice, drowsing against his shoulder after hours of tending others. Her birthmark was just a shadow in the firelight, part of the face he loved more than life itself. He'd walked through hell tonight, and he'd do it again tomorrow if needed. Not for glory or thanks, but because this was what you did when you'd found home. Outside, the cracked bell began to ring, someone celebrating survival with its imperfect voice. Inside, surrounded by neighbors becoming family, Cole McKenna finally understood what he'd been searching for through all those wandering years. Not just love, though that was part of it. Not just purpose, though that mattered too. But belonging, the knowledge that your life was woven into other lives so tightly that separation became unthinkable. The storm had passed. They'd all survived. And in surviving together, they'd built something stronger than any blizzard could destroy. ***, part Senid, New Bell at Sagebrush Bend. Spring arrived in Wyoming like a prodigal child, late, unpredictable, but ultimately welcome. The mountains shed their white cloaks gradually, revealing the green promise beneath. And on a hillside overlooking Sagebrush Bend, the new schoolhouse rose brick by brick, a testament to what a community could build when united by purpose. Cole stood on the roof, setting the final beam in place while Beatrice directed operations from below. Her voice carried clear in the morning air, organizing volunteers with the same efficiency she'd once used to arrange makeshift classrooms. Mrs. Martinez, those windows go on the south wall. We need maximum light. Hattie, help the younger children sort the books. Carefully now. 6 months had passed since the blizzard. Since Silas Throne met his end in the snow, the town had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Where once suspicious eyes had followed the ugly schoolmarm, now respectful nods greeted the woman who'd helped save their children from more than just ignorance. "Letter for you, Cole." Young Tommy Morrison ran up, waving an envelope. From Nebraska. Cole climbed down carefully, accepting the letter with work-roughened hands. Miriam's familiar handwriting brought a smile. His sister had visited at Christmas as promised, arriving just after the storm to find her brother not only settled, but genuinely happy. The two women had bonded immediately over teaching methods and prairie survival, leaving Cole somewhat bemused by their instant friendship. He read quickly, then looked up to find Beatrice watching him with knowing eyes. "She's coming," he said simply. "Sold the farm, bought a teaching certificate. Says if her stubborn brother can find home in Wyoming, so can she." Beatrice's smile lit her whole face. "Another teacher, we can expand the upper grades. Maybe even start that medical preparation course Hattie dreams about." "Getting ahead of yourself," Cole warned, but his own grin betrayed him. "Building's not even finished yet." "It will be." She moved closer, resting a hand on his arm. "Simon sent word that the railroad's adding a proper depot here. More families will come. We'll need the space." They stood together, watching their students work alongside their parents. The Freeman siblings carefully shelved books, their mother having taken a job at Nettie's boarding house to stay in town. The Martinez twins translated instructions for newer Mexican families who'd arrived seeking work and found education too. Even Daniel Morrison, once so suspicious of Indian learning, now proudly demonstrated knot tying to younger boys. "In Mrs. McKenna, Doctor," Harkin approached, mopping his brow despite the cool morning. "Might I have a word about Miss Bloom?" Beatrice tensed slightly. Hattie had been her star pupil, but also her biggest worry. The girl's intelligence far outstripped local opportunities. "I've been corresponding with colleagues in Denver," the doctor continued. "There's a new nursing college opening. They're accepting female students. I'd like to sponsor Miss Bloom's attendance." "Oh, Dr. Harkin," Beatrice's eyes misted. "That's wonderful. But will she want to leave?" "Why don't we ask her?" Cole suggested. Spotting Hattie organizing medical supplies with her usual intensity, when presented with the opportunity, Hattie went very still. Then, to everyone's surprise, she burst into tears. "I thought I'd have to choose," she sobbed, "between staying to help here and following my dreams. But Mrs. McKenna always said education creates opportunities, not limitations." "You'll come back," Beatrice said firmly, embracing the girl. "Sagebrush Bend needs its own nurse, its own doctor. Someday." "The first graduate of the new school," Cole added, setting the bar high for others. That afternoon, the whole town gathered for the barn raising, though, in this case. It was a bell tower raising. The old cracked bell had been restored as much as possible, its splits sealed with bronze that gleamed like a scar worn proudly. Some wanted a new bell. Mayor Dawson addressed the crowd. But Mrs. McKenna insisted on keeping this one, said it had earned its place. Broken things still have purpose, Beatrice said when called to speak. This bell called students when we had no building. It survived fire and storm. Its crack reminds us that perfection isn't necessary for service. Reverend Michaels Pike's replacement, a younger man with actual charity in his heart, offered a blessing that included all faiths and none. As the bell was hoisted into place, the crowd fell silent. Cole pulled the rope, and the bell rang out across the valley. Not perfect, but clear and true, calling everyone to account for what they'd built together. The celebration lasted into evening. Tables groaned under potluck dishes representing the town's expanding diversity. Mexican tamales sat beside German strudel, Chinese dumplings, and good old American apple pie. Children of all colors played together while their parents planned the school's future. "It's like a dream," Beatrice murmured to Cole as they danced to fiddle music. 6 months ago, I had nothing but determination and a birthmark everyone stared at. "You had more than that," Cole corrected, spinning her carefully. "You had vision. The rest of us just needed time to see it." She touched her birthmark self-consciously, a gesture less frequent now, but not entirely gone. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Throne hadn't forced our marriage? We'd have found each other anyway." Cole's certainty surprised even him. Might have taken longer, might have been harder, but this, he gestured to encompass not just them, but the entire celebration. This was always going to happen. Such confidence. Mr. McKenna. Such faith. Mrs. McKenna. As the evening progressed, gifts appeared for the new school. Books from traveling merchants who'd heard of their work, maps from a cartographer passing through, a globe from the railroad company, delivered by Simon Caro himself. For geography lessons, Caro explained, so students can see where the rails will take them. "And where they came from," added Roberto Martinez, tracing the path from Mexico to Wyoming. "Both matter." Sigh. Near midnight, as the celebration wound down, Cole and Beatrice walked through the new building one more time. Moonlight streamed through windows that actually closed properly. Rows of real desks waited for students. A proper blackboard stretched across the front wall. "It's perfect," Beatrice breathed. "It's a building," Cole corrected gently. "You make it a school." She turned in his arms, moonlight catching the tears on her cheeks. "I love you, Cole McKenna. Have I told you that today?" "Only a dozen times." "Not nearly enough then." She stretched up to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Thank you for staying, for fighting, for burning your boots to save children." "Thank you for being too stubborn to quit," he replied, "for seeing potential where others saw problems, for making me believe in tomorrow again." They stood together in the empty classroom, but it wasn't really empty. It was full of dreams waiting to unfold, lessons waiting to be learned, futures waiting to be written. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, not threatening now, just part of the landscape. The sound was answered by the bark of town dogs, civilization and wildness coexisting in the way of all frontier places. "Letter came yesterday," Cole said eventually. "From the Territorial Education Board. They want you to help establish teaching standards for other frontier schools." "Me?" Beatrice pulled back in surprise. "But I'm just—" "The woman who built a school from nothing, who taught through fire and blizzard, who proved that education belongs to everyone." He smiled at her shocked expression. "Accept it. You're not the ugly schoolmarm anymore. You're the example others want to follow." "We're the example," she corrected firmly. None of this happened alone. Morning came too soon, bringing the first day of classes in the new building. Students arrived early, eager to claim desks and explore their expanded domain. The bell rang out its imperfect call, and children streamed in, farm kids and town kids, rich and poor, every color God made humans in. Beatrice stood at the front, her simple dress neat, her hair pinned back, her birthmark catching the morning sun. To Cole, watching from the doorway, she'd never looked more beautiful. "Welcome," she said simply, "to the first day of the rest of your lives. In this room, you'll learn to read, write, and figure. But more than that, you'll learn to think, to question, to dream of what's possible and then work to make it real." "Like you did, Mrs. McKenna?" Grace Freeman asked, her health restored and spirit blooming. "Like we all did," Beatrice corrected. "Together." Cole slipped away as lessons began, but the sound of engaged voices followed him. He had his own work helping to establish the town's new lumber mill, ensuring jobs for the growing population. But he'd be back at lunch, as he was every day, to eat with his wife and watch the miracle of minds opening to possibility. At the Mercantile, Mrs. Wellington stopped him. "Mr. McKenna, I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I thought many unkind things." "Water under the bridge, ma'am." "No, it needs saying. You and your wife have shown us what we could be instead of what we were. That's a debt this town can't repay." Similar conversations happened throughout the day. The barber, the banker, even some of Throne's former associates, all acknowledging the transformation that had begun with one determined woman and the drifter who'd stayed. That evening, as Cole and Beatrice sat on their porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, Miriam's letter opened between them. Life felt full of possibility. "She'll be here next month," Beatrice said, scanning the pages again. "We'll need to prepare the teacher's quarters. Oh, and she's bringing textbooks from Omaha, advanced mathematics." "Easy there, Professor. One miracle at a time." She laughed, leaning into his shoulder. "Why settle for one when we can have dozens?" In the distance, the school bell caught the evening breeze, humming its cracked note across the valley. Children's voices carried from the town, playing games that mixed languages and cultures into something uniquely American. The railroad would bring more change, more challenges, but also more opportunities for those prepared to seize them. "No regrets?" Beatrice asked softly. Cole thought of all the miles he'd traveled, all the towns he'd passed through searching for something he couldn't name, all those years of running from the war's ghosts, only to find peace in the last place he'd expected, in the arms of a woman the world had labeled ugly. In a town that had tried to use them both. "Only one," he said finally. "What's that?" "That it took so long to find you." She turned to kiss him, and in that moment, with the mountains glowing gold and their community settling into evening routines, Cole McKenna knew with absolute certainty that every mistake, every wrong turn, every moment of pain had been worth it to arrive here. The bell rang once more. A student practicing, or perhaps just celebrating the joy of making noise that meant something. Its cracked voice carried clearly, imperfect, honest, and absolutely beautiful, like the life they'd built, like the love they'd found, like the future they'd create together. In Sagebrush Bend, Wyoming, where the wind carried the scent of sage and the promise of rain, a scarred soldier and a marked teacher had proven that broken things could still ring true, that education could triumph over ignorance, that love could grow in the rockiest soil, and that sometimes the very best mistakes were the ones that looked like disasters until you realized they were blessings in disguise. The stars came out one by one, watching over a town transformed, a school established, and two hearts that had found their way home to each other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was for gratitude and quiet joy, and the knowledge that they'd built something worth keeping. In the new schoolhouse, books waited on shelves and maps hung on walls, ready to open young minds to the whole wide world. But the most important lesson had already been learned by everyone in Sagebrush Bend, that courage, compassion, and community could overcome any obstacle. And that love, real love, saw beauty where others saw only flaws. The cracked bell sang its last note of the day, calling all souls to rest and dream of tomorrow's possibilities. In a little house on the edge of town, Cole and Beatrice McKenna held each other close, grateful beyond words for the forced marriage that had become their greatest fortune, the supposed mistake that had led them to exactly where they belonged. Together, forever, home. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love and redemption in the Old West. I'm curious to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what touched your heart in Cole and Beatrice's journey. If this tale of the ugly schoolmarm and her reluctant husband moved you, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more authentic frontier stories. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover this heartwarming tale of how broken things can still ring true. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunset.